men and military machines crushed, Saddam Hussein finally surrenders. And in Kuwait City, relief and celebration. The war is over.
This is NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw. Tonight, America at peace. Reporting from Kuwait City, Tom Brokaw with Jane Pauley in New York.
Good evening from Kuwait City. Well, now even Saddam Hussein gets it. His army and his claims of superiority have been completely wiped out. So now Saddam Hussein finally is accepting President Bush's terms for surrender. We have NBC's John Cochran at the White House again tonight. Fred Francis at his post at the Pentagon. John, let's begin with you and the good news.
Tom, although the president said he was impressed by the reception that the Kuwaiti people gave to American GIs, he seemed almost embarrassed when the Kuwaiti ambassador came here to express his gratitude.
But before I say what's
The president told the ambassador there was more good news, news from Baghdad.
the Iraqi government has now agreed to designate military commanders to meet with coalition counterparts to arrange for the military aspects of this ceasefire.
Bush said the meetings will take place very soon, and the prime topic will be the release of POWs and civilians held by the Iraqis.
And we are going to get back our POWs, and we're going to do it fast.
But today was more a time for George Bush to thank his troops and to receive thanks.
There isn't, I believe, a more precious gift that could be given to people than their freedom and their liberty and their homeland. And Mr. President, you have done this. And you will go down in history as the great liberator of my country.
You and I both know it was the privates and the sergeants and the first lieutenants and the generals that deserve the credit. It is a special day, and Ambassador, I just can't tell you what's in my heart, but I am very pleased, very proud that your country's free.
The Saudi ambassador, Prince Bandar, told the president that American troops prevented a certain invasion of his country by Iraqi forces.
You should be very proud of the United States Armed Forces. They did a marvelous job.
Mrs. Bush went to an army base to express her thanks to the living and the dead.
You know, with all the joy and pride we feel today, we also feel a deep sorrow for those precious young men and women who won't come home. We will never forget them.
A lot of emotions were evident at the White House today: sorrow, relief, pride, and a deep satisfaction at sticking it to Saddam. Tom?
Thank you, John Cochran at the White House. Well, the president's triumph in the Persian Gulf has brought him soaring public support at home. Our latest NBC News Wall Street Journal poll shows 85% of the public approves of the job the president is doing. That's the highest level of support for a president since Harry S. Truman, when Germany surrendered in June 1945. And Fred Francis at the Pentagon now, I gather they are already planning to bring some American troops home.
That's right, Tom. If the peace holds, the first combat pilots and foot soldiers will be home within 3 weeks. But it will take up to a year, according to Pentagon officials, to pull out all American forces.
You've got a force in and around Kuwait providing security for Kuwait. And then you've got other forces that are safeguarding the U.S. troops that are doing that job.
Pentagon sources say a security zone in southern Iraq will require at least a division of U.S. tanks and men, roughly 20,000 soldiers, for up to a year. Also, say Pentagon officials, at least 2 aircraft carrier battle groups will be required for regional security for up to 1 year. The USS Nimitz and the USS Forrestal will be sent to the Gulf region from the States to take up that duty. And finally, say officials, at least 72 tactical fighters will be staying somewhere on the Arabian Peninsula until 1992. But the first troops to come home will be the first ones to defend Saudi Arabia last August. The 18,000 men and women of the 82nd Airborne, soldiers from the 101st Airborne, and a tank unit from Fort Stewart, Georgia, the 24th Mechanized Division. It was that tank division which late yesterday fought the most important single battle of the ground campaign. The 24th, with attack helicopter support, destroyed more than 200 Iraqi tanks in one engagement west of Basra, Iraq. It will take 3 months, say officials, to repair, steam clean, and load all the other heavy tanks and combat equipment. and another 3 to 6 months to load and ship the millions of tons of bombs, supplies, and other war materials, as well as all the men and women who came with it.
It was a Herculean logistic task to get them there, and thank God, because our casualties were so light, it's going to be just about as Herculean to get them back.
The guiding policy, Tom, is to demonstrate to the Arab world that the U.S. will pull out its offensive army with almost the same speed as it arrived, but to leave just enough firepower there to handle a small crisis. Tom?
Thank you, Fred Francis. Well, here in Kuwait City, the end of the war brought feelings of relief and anger and celebration. Kuwaiti troops were the stars of the day as they staged a noisy, impromptu parade along Kuwait's waterfront. A short while later, U.S. Marines claimed the U.S. Embassy. They detonated landmines the Iraqis planted on their grounds and swept the building for booby traps. Just down the road, the British ambassador was glad to be back on the job. Kuwait City, however, remains a dangerous place. There's lots of unexploded ammunition. The Iraqis were dug in here all along the shoreline of Kuwait City, awaiting the amphibious landing that wasn't necessary, and they left in such a hurry. There are still cases of rocket grenades. Kuwaiti police rounded up this storeroom of weapons once the Iraqis fled as the ground war advanced. Some of the crates were marked "From the Jordan military," which will not help King Hussein's case with the West. These policemen were glad to reclaim their jobs, but they all had tales of abuse, torture, and kidnapping. This man lost his 15-year-old son to the Iraqis, a young resistance fighter. He showed me a scar where he said the Iraqi troops tried to burn an S for Saddam on his arm.
I have my friends that killed them. They killed them in axe. You know the axe?
With an axe? They
Yeah,
killed your friends with an axe?
The
policeman produced an Iraqi soldier who had surrendered. He said he was a businessman who was pressed into service just 2 months ago.
If I refused to come to her, men of Saddam Hussein is take my sister or my wife or my mother, I cannot say no.
And what does he think of Saddam Hussein now?
I want to him kill.
There are fresh memories of the bad times for 7 months. A form of vigilante justice is setting in. A suspected collaborator was arrested and hauled off. Civilian guards questioned motorists, looking especially for Palestinian collaborators. On another corner, Kuwaitis burned an Iraqi flag, their final rejection of the idea of Kuwait as the 19th province of Saddam Hussein. But for the most part, the celebration brought scenes from times gone by.
Rock and roll!
American GIs as heroes.
This baby was born during the crisis and has never been free until today.
In our NBC News Wall Street Journal poll, we also learned, no surprise, that the military leaders of Operation Desert Storm are also held in high esteem by the American public. Joint Chiefs Chairman Colin Powell, General Norman Schwarzkopf, and Defense Secretary Dick Cheney, all at the same high level. In just a moment, when Nightly News continues, Jane Pauley in New York talking with Tom Aspel in Baghdad.